Hello, my name is Todd Miranda, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use the new alternation properties that were introduced for items controls in WPF for .NET 3.5 Service Pack 1. Let's begin in Microsoft Visual Studio 2008, and we'll choose File, New Project. And we're going to create a Windows project. We'll choose a WPF application, and we'll name this accordingly, and choose OK. We want to make sure that we choose .NET Framework 3.5, and if you choose .NET Framework 3.5, you'll get the Framework 3.5 Service Pack 1 if you've in fact installed Service Pack 1. Alright, so that again brings us to our default templates that get loaded for us when we create a WPF application. And we're just going to go ahead and we'll work with the grid. So we'll just leave the grid in place. And we need to use some type of items control in order to demonstrate the alternation properties. So let's just use a list view. So we're going to create a list view, and we'll give this a name. We'll just call this list names. And for now that'll be good. So there's our list view. We want to create an item template so we can display some items in our list view. So let's do list view dot items template. Alright, within our item template we'll have a data template, and then we'll do something pretty straightforward. Let's just create a stack panel, and our stack panel will, let's just leave the orientation for the stack panel vertical instead of horizontal, so that our items will actually stack vertically, and that'll really give us a good indication of why would we want to use this particular technique. So let's go with stack panel orientation being vertical, which is the default. Let's create a text block, and we'll just say that this text is going to be, and we're going to go ahead and write a binding expression, and we're going to specify that the property that we're going to bind to is first name, and then we'll do another text block, and this will bind to last name. Okay, now we don't have to put path here. Path is the default for here, so we could have just put first name, but I always like to go ahead and use path, and that way when you're coming back and you're looking at your code, to me it's a little bit easier to read, especially if you've got someone that's following behind you that may not be as familiar with WPF. Just kind of good practice. Go ahead and write out path. That way it makes it a little bit easier, like I said, to understand where first name is coming from. That really is just for maintenance, coming back to this code later, or having someone else come behind you in your code. Alright, so that gives us our data template for our list view. So let's just go ahead and at that point let's go to the code behind. And we're going to create a class that we can instantiate, and we can use this class to generate some items that we'll be able to data bind to our list view. So let's just do public class, and we'll just do public class employee, and we'll do public string, let's do first name. We'll use the new features of C# to make that a little bit easier for us. So this is the automatic accessors that create the get and set for us, and effectively by doing this, what happens behind the scenes is an internal variable is created for us, or a private variable created for us, and all this, the get and set, is wired up to retrieve and set that private variable within the class. But that's all done for us, so that's really kind of a nice feature in C#. Okay, so let's just go to our window 1, our instantiator for this class, and let's just instantiate a few employees, and we'll create some data that we can bind to our list view. So let's create a list of type employee, and we'll just call this imps equals new list employee, and then we'll do imps.add new employee, first name equals John, last name equals Doe. Alright, so there's our add. Let's go ahead and add some more of those. So that should be enough. Let's put in here some other names. That'll give us a little bit more room to work with. And then we've got, perhaps we've got a few other names in here. Put some fun ones in. Alright, that should give us enough to work with. Alright, and once we do that, we're going to do our list names dot item source equals imps. Alright, so let's build this and run it. And we should get a window with our list view here, our names, and see that since we used the stack panel and we stacked our names vertically, it really is hard when you look at this list. It's really hard to really kind of tell the difference between where one item stops and the next item begins. It would really be nice if we could go in here, we could do like an alternating row type pattern that you see typically, where we're going to change the color, the background color of an alternating row. So let's take a look at how we might do that. We're going to go up into our window, and in the window.resources, we're going to add a style. And we'll use this style to actually set the background color for our item, our list view item. And then we're going to actually use the alternation to be able to set how those colors change and how they alternate depending on which item you're at in the list. Now we could do this, traditionally we could do this with a converter, so we could actually look at binding the background to some index value perhaps, or some value in the data that we could use in a converter to determine what color to make the background. But with the new alternation properties, it's a lot easier to do. So that's really where we're going to focus. So we're going to set the target type of our style to X type, and this is a list view item that we want to utilize. And then in our style, we'll actually use the setter. We'll set the property, which is going to be background, and we'll set its value to, let's just say, blue. Alright, so let's run this again and make sure that we actually set our background the way we want it. Yes. Alright, so there's our background, but we still don't really have the alternating background. We've set the background of all the particular items, and we don't have the alternation, which is really what we're going to talk about. So let's go back down here to our list view, and in all items controls, there's a new property called alternation count. And this allows us to set the number of items that will be included before we reset our alternation count. So if we say, and let's just put 2 here, if we say 2, then our alternation index, which is another property, is going to go from 0 to 1, then back to 0, then back to 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. So alternation count, likewise, if we made this 3, it would go 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. So by setting the alternation count to 2, we can go up here and we can make a change in our style, and we can trigger off of, again, this other property called alternation index. And triggering on that alternation index, we can set the background based on that index value. So let's see how we do that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a style.triggers block. And in our triggers block, we're going to create a trigger. We're going to set that trigger's property, and this is the property that it's looking at, to items control dot alternation index, and we're going to set the value that we're looking for to trigger that to 0. So again, this is 0 based, and then I'm going to copy my setter, or actually I'm going to cut my setter and paste it directly inside that trigger block, except we're going to make it light blue. Alright, so now we're triggering when the alternation index is equal to 0. We're going to set the background to light blue. Well, let's take a look at what that looks like. Alright, so here you see now we have an alternating background between light blue and whatever the default background is. In this case, we don't have a default background, so we get the light blue and then what looks like white, which is what we're seeing as the background of the actual window. So, very easy way that we can use this alternation index along with the alternation count to be able to change and manipulate the rows. And we could set any property on those rows just using that. Effectively, this is really just a value that we can utilize to trigger off of, or that we can utilize in some type of a value converter to do whatever it is that we'd like to do. The alternation count controls the number of these, the index, the max index value, if you want to look at it that way, but it's actually the number of items that we'll iterate through before we start our alternation over again. So to demonstrate that, I'll tell you what, let's do it this way. Let's go up to triggers, and we're going to create another trigger based on the alternation index. We're going to look at the value of 1, and maybe we'll come into here and we'll just make this yellow. So let's run that now. Alright, so now you see that when the alternation index is 0, we've got our light blue color. When alternation index is 1, we have our yellow color, and we can alternate back and forth. If we increase the alternation count to 3 and run it again, this kind of demonstrates what we're talking about with the alternation count. So we have the alternation index of 0, alternation index of 1, and then the alternation index of 2, which we didn't set a trigger for. So again, we're leaving that just the default. So you can see that now we have an index value of 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the alternation count gives us the number of items before we reset that count. So hopefully that makes sense. So you can see here that there's a lot that we can do with the alternation index to set properties based on where we are within a particular iteration through those items that we've bound. And it's really just a good way, at its simplest form, it's really a good way to do an alternating color very easily in our items controls. And this works for any items control now in WPF. And these new properties were introduced into Service Pack 1 of the .NET Framework 3.5. So if you have Service Pack 1, you'll see this new alternation count and alternation index, and it can start using it right away.